clock is already on. I met Omar earlier today, and we were basically having a chat in terms of, what all should be covered in 15 minutes. And I guess the thought which crossed my mind is, if DeFi was to have a baby with alternative lending, you actually get at pay, right? I'm sorry I'm using that term.
Sounds right to me.
Sounds right. Right. So our topic is first step in a startup's journey, right? You've obviously gone through a very exciting period over the last 3 years. When I look at you from the outside, without knowing much about AtPay, because you're not in this part of the world, but thanks for actually briefing me over the last couple of days on your business. I see distributed ledger, blockchain is a key part of what you're trying to do. I see e-commerce, I see BNPL, I see crypto, I see a big party, right? Yep. Talk to me a little bit about, when did you guys start and kind of what was the genesis of the idea?
Sure. So, AtPay is a payment processor, and basically we are built on the blockchain, and we essentially have two main product lines. One is we facilitate shopping and paying with crypto, and also a decentralized microfinancing buy now, pay later product. But essentially, in terms of the genesis of the idea, I initially was trading crypto assets, and I remember I'm a veteran of the dot-com boom, and I remember the seeds of the current tech behemoths were born during the dot-com boom. So when I started trading crypto assets in 2014, I thought, you know what, there's something here, and I don't want to miss out like I did during the dot-com boom. So I took a deep dive into the tech, and I remember whilst I was doing that, meeting people, reading a whole heap of stuff, I get an email saying that my son had just used my card to make a repayment to Afterpay. Afterpay in Australia, which is where we're from, is one of the leading buy now, pay later platforms, which was bought by Block back in 2021. So I've gone like, you know what, my son's using my card to make a repayment. He was at uni at the time, he's 22 years old. So I said to him, tell me a little bit about this. What is this Afterpay? And he sat down and he began to explain it. And then basically, the more we sat down and talked about it, the more I looked into buy now, pay later. And along with my research into blockchain tech, it just dawned on me that it was a space that was ripe for disruption. And that's how the journey, essentially the genesis,
of the journey began. It's interesting you use the term a dot-com veteran.
Yeah.
I consider myself a victim of the dot-com burst. Rather than a veteran of the other. So it's interesting, right? So if I take a step back, you identified the problem, right? Which is a good place to start with any startup, correct, right? I like the fact, and I think you shared earlier, that you applied multiple lenses towards how do I solve the problem, because there's always a Me Too product which could have been launched. And let's be honest, Australia has one too many Me Too's in the whole sort of BNPL space, which is why I think some of them are suffering. And then what makes it most interesting is, at least for me, is that you chose a path of solving a problem which was different and arguably, in my humble opinion, sustainable or not.
Yeah, look, it had to be sustainable. We looked at the current players in our part of the world and even globally, and it dawned on me that they were built. The model was flawed. At the end of the day, it was flawed for a number of reasons. One is that the foundations of it are heavily reliant on almost nominal revenue lines, and technology that is easily replicated. So if you look at the BNPL space, essentially there's not much to differentiate between the players out there. There might be some fee structures that are slightly different, but essentially there's not a lot of stickiness when it comes to the users themselves. And that was a key part that we wanted to address, that will allow us, and give us the ability to have that competitive advantage. And fortunately for us, being in blockchain at the time and being able to identify that blockchain and cryptocurrencies, they have a key advantage when it comes to the user experience, and that is the ability to engage in a manner that some of the other tech can't. So for example, if you look at what we've done, we've got essentially a three-pronged ecosystem. We've got an asset management side, which is essentially the wallets that we provision users. We've got our credit provision side, which is probably the most unique aspect, and we can probably talk about that later if you want. And then we've got the marketplace. So essentially what we're doing is we're capturing users into our ecosystem via the asset management side, and then we're letting them deploy those assets within the ecosystem in a way, and rewarding them along the way, in a way that keeps them engaged. And we're not just, when we talk about participants in our ecosystem, we're not talking just about the shoppers or the buy now, pay later shoppers. We're also talking about the merchants, because the merchant story is a very powerful one. And then beyond that, there's also the ability to, for any individual on the asset side to play a role in the credit provision.
So, Omar, I'm going to put you on the spot, right? So I've seen the movie a few times. That just tells you how old I am, right? And I've seen founders obsess over the ideas they come up with, right? What did you guys do in terms of actually going and testing your idea with, who I say, the customer? Where did you capture the voice of customer from?
Okay, so the research initially, a lot of it was done on a lot of the data that was provisioned through publications, material that was publicly available, surveys through payment gateways that were in existence, and even direct surveys through people that were close to us. And the more we did that, and then there was also the evolution that you saw in the market. So you began to see the usage cases, and that also validated the direction that we were taking. It wasn't an absolute science, and you did have to pivot along the way, but in pivoting, you know, that agility also often spawned ideas that made AppPay, as it stands today, even more interesting and more appealing.
No, so I do want you to get, but see, a lot of people actually see pivots as like a negative, right? They feel like, oh, I have to pivot. I just wasn't smart enough with my first idea. I disagree with that view. I think pivot is about agility. Talk to us a little bit about that sort of pivot and what was that?
Yeah, there's been some interesting pivots, there's no doubt about that. And some people say, oh, it's the journey, not the destination, right? But it is also the delivery, right? So the journey is one thing, but the delivery is the other thing. So the pivoting has to be meaningful. In our specific case, so initially during the concept phase, you know, it was early stage, and we were looking at building, say, on Ethereum. At the time, transaction costs were actually very low. So if anybody's been in crypto for a while, if you can recall when transaction costs on Ethereum gas fees were around 30 cents US or 40 cents US, well, that's when, you know, we were at that stage. But then in early 2021, the gas fees exploded. I remember paying $125 for one single transaction. And then quickly it dawned on us that, you know, we need to really explore alternative ledgers. So that's when, you know, we really began, you know, scrambling around looking for alternatives. But the alternatives were not just about cost, but they were all throughput rates were also obviously there is a relationship between the two, but that's what we needed to, we needed the solution to be meaningful in that regard. Solana came across and it was just boom out of nowhere. Everyone was talking it up. The throughput rates were, you know, extraordinary at the time for blockchain, and even the cost per transaction, and they still are exceptionally cheap. And so that was meaningful for us to actually pivot and then really engage the build on that particular ledger. Since then, what happened was obviously Solana had some outages. You know, we won't go into too much detail about them. They did cause us distress a bit, but also forced us to look at redundancy when it came to being a multi-chain sort of application. So engaging the likes of Algorand, Polygon, we had some discussions with some engineering teams on both platforms. You know, that cemented in our idea that we needed to be multi-chain.
Okay, so I'm unfortunately a consultant, so I'll have to fall back to it. So just let me replay the journey. You identified a problem, you tried to solve for the problem in a manner that was different than what the competition was. You validated that against various sources, which in my humble opinion is capturing the voice of customer, right? You started building the product. You realized that, you know, certain pivots had to be made because there were certain things which are out of your control, right? Another area where I've actually seen teams or early stage startups fail is that they obsess about the people who came up with the original idea and don't necessarily build a team which is, in my view, I guess, emotionally inclusive,
Yeah.
What was your journey?
Well, look, you know, it was interesting for a number of reasons. One is at the time you're building a blockchain-based project. You're harnessing cryptocurrencies and you're espousing to your teams the benefits of the features that you're planning to build and how you're going to change the world. One of the issues you have to deal with is that there was a scarcity of real talent that could really take your vision and make it happen. And you know, the crypto projects in themselves have got a lot of challenges that are exceptional relative to other startups. And for example, you know, you've got a standard roadmap that typically involves a listing on an exchange which has inherent risks all of its own, and then having people that really understand those risks. You've got the build phase, and you've got marketing and community building functions that you need to fulfill, and then finding the people that have got the experience, because there's no shortage of those that will come up to you and go, yeah, we can do this and we can do that. And you learn as you go along to quickly identify those that really do have the talent versus those that are just after a fee. And for us, it was important to harness the best talents, and we have, but we have had our challenges, because the belief in the product and in the uniqueness of it was what drove us. And so sharing the vision, and the more we communicated that to our team, the more the team would, I guess there was an element of learning as they went along, the more the team would put the tentacles out there and capture talent that we needed. And so the team would morph into something that really is able to take the vision and make it happen.
Right, and that's essential. So I'm going to come to the next one, which has been the tricky one. I think you were fortunate. You launched in 2020, right? The funding winter, as we call it, came a couple of years later. Were you able to successfully raise enough money?
Yeah, so we raised money in basically a seed round, family and friends, and at the time as
rich family and friends.
Yeah, we could say that. It's always good to have that. And I think, you know, we did have help because the market was strong at the time. So that meant that there was a lot of engagement in terms of the upside. You know, people were going, okay, you know, there's chances you're going to make money there. But, you know, it's not all what it sounds better than it actually was, because, you know, once again, during the bear market of last year, you know, we listed our token, the AppPay token, on MEXC, and essentially, you know, it was a bear market, so there were challenges that were faced there in that regard, and which we did address. And remember, we're still, you know, in a pre-launch phase. So in 6 to 8 weeks, we'll have the complete build and the proper launch in our home market of Australia. But essentially, this is a part of the crypto startup journey. Sometimes you are, for example, listing, and the environment, you've got to deal with a macro environment that is not necessarily conducive to you or your community in the way that you want it to be. So you need to deal with issues and move on. Fortunately for us, I think there is a lot of loyalty, because there is a lot of belief in what we're doing, the uniqueness of what we're delivering. You know, this decentralised microfinancing model, which essentially opens up the opportunity for anybody to stake a stable coin and extend credit to a shopper via a buy now, pay later product has not been done, and it's a clear differentiator with regard to our competitors. It's something that we know we can leverage off and you know, use in other areas of finance as well. So this is DeFi really going to a real-world transaction. So rather than just being somebody that lends crypto and borrows crypto, this is, you know, lend your crypto and execute a e-commerce transaction.
Excellent. So we're out of time. I'm going to ask the last question. I've been on the, I guess, on the side rails of a number of startups. It always feels like you're on a roller coaster, right? To the audience that's in the room, you know, your 4 or 5 giveaways or takeaways that they should go away from your experience.
From the experience of a startup journey, or?
Startup journey.
I'd say as an entrepreneur, you really need to get your head checked out, because the challenges are really going to test your mettle, test your resolve. I think if you're fortunate, as we have been, and the market validates through the response when you go public with your vision, and the more visibility there is around your product, your architecture. If you're getting the sort of feedback that suggests that you're onto a good thing, that motivates you, it continues to drive you forward. So I would say if you have a vision that you are seeing some traction in your communications, and we were, so when we initially went public with our concept, we were inundated with interest from all manner of enterprises. Some of the largest entities globally took an interest in what we were doing. Whether it was just out of curiosity or something more, you'll find out down the line, right? So if you are getting that sort of traction, then that's giving you the motivation to maintain the path that you're on and to see your journey through. If you're getting traction from investors, that's another positive thing, because in most cases, in my opinion, these days investors are much better informed, it's about team as well. I think having the right team is probably one of the most significant things that you can put together, because a cracker team will make it happen.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add to it is there's no rocket science. I think there's enough literature out there which says what a startup journey feels like. I think it all comes down to how well you're able to execute it, right? There is an element of timing, let's be honest, especially with the period we've gone through. But with that, I'd like to thank everybody. But I would suggest, if you guys haven't had a look at Pay, that's at Pay, you guys should, because I found the model fairly fascinating, and I'm a very jaded human being. So if you guys get a chance, do have a look at his business. I think his kiosk is in the room, but if you don't get a chance to go to visit the kiosk, then do look them up on the website, right? Omar, thanks a lot. I'm pretty confident a few people in the room have taken a few things away.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. And come and check us out, have a conversation.
Thank you, everyone. So let's thank Arjun and Omar. Omar, great product, great story. I'm glad you have that son who told you what to do, and we should all learn from our children. But we're really looking forward to see how you go. And just, the vagaries of the startup journey, your need for agility and resilience, and you're about to list and the market crashes, and you keep on going. So good work, great product. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Let's give them a big hand.
Thank you. Thank you.